The Vorrkai High Council had a rule. A very simple, very old, very reasonable rule. It went like this: if a species has not yet figured out faster than light travel on its own, you leave them alone. You do not visit. You do not wave. You certainly do not land a survey shuttle in the middle of what they call a cornfield, and then try to explain stellar cartography to a creature that still argues over which invisible sky father controls the rain. Elder Ssaveth had followed this rule for 214 rotations of his homeworld. Then came the survey of Sector 7 Morath. Then came the small, pale blue planet, third from its sun, spinning like it had somewhere important to be. And then came the moment supreme Navigator Grix, youngest on the council and absolutely insufferable about it, said those words that would later be inscribed on Ssaveth's headstone. Elder Grix said, pulling up a scan on the bridge display, they have nuclear weapons but they also have something called a petting zoo. I genuinely do not understand what we are looking at. Ssaveth looked. He looked for a long time. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Tova, a veteran of 43 first contact situations, a being who had stared down 3 predatory civilizations and once negotiated a peace treaty while suffering from food poisoning. Tova stared at the screen. Tova blinked all 4 of her eyes, one at a time, slowly, like a machine rebooting. They, Tova said carefully, have built structures to house animals they find appealing. For entertainment. Animals that serve no military or agricultural function. They just, look at them. Yes, said Grix. And they bring their offspring. Yes. To look at the animals. The offspring appear to enjoy it very much. Ssaveth pressed 3 of his fingers to his temple ridge. We are leaving. They did not leave. What happened instead was this: the probe they had quietly dropped into the planet's upper atmosphere was struck, against all mathematical probability, by a chunk of frozen debris from the planet's orbital garbage ring, which sent it spinning downward, which triggered its emergency beacon, which pinged their ship loudly and repeatedly at 4 in the morning ship time, which caused Navigator Grix to hit the wrong panel in his sleep fog, which activated the probe's distress flare, which was visible from the planet's surface as a streak of brilliant violet light, which was filmed by no fewer than 9,000 of the planet's inhabitants on their small handheld communication devices, which resulted in the video being shared across their global information network 47 million times before Ssaveth had finished his morning nutrient paste. The planet's inhabitants called it a UFO. They were not wrong. The Vorrkai Council convened in emergency session. The vote to leave was 6-6, which had never happened before and was technically unconstitutional, and while they argued about that, Tova came into the chamber and set a data tablet on the table with the expression of someone who had found a live explosive in their lunch. They know we're here, she said. They've triangulated the probe's origin signal. And their military satellites are now actively scanning for us. How long until they find the ship? Ssaveth asked. 14 hours if we stay still. 3 hours if they get lucky. Ssaveth closed his eyes. In all his years, all his surveys, all his careful and responsible non-interfering, he had never once been caught. And now here he was. Caught by a species that had only figured out how to leave their own atmosphere in the last blink of a geological eye. Caught by creatures that cried at music. That named their weather systems. That, according to the cultural database, had a holiday specifically dedicated to a large rodent predicting seasonal change. It was humiliating. It was genuinely, cosmically humiliating. All right, he said, standing up and straightening his observation robes. We will make contact. Controlled, minimal, professional contact. We identify ourselves, we explain the probe malfunction, we sign the standard non-interference compact, and we leave. Clean. Simple. 40 minutes, maximum. Commander Tova looked at him the way a person looks at someone who has just said they will take a quick swim in a volcano. Elder, she said, I have been reading their cultural database for the last 3 hours. And? She picked up the tablet again. She read aloud, in the year 2019, an online community of this species organized what they called a raid on a classified military facility because, and I am quoting directly here, they wanted to see the aliens. The mobilization involved over 2 million participants. The military response was immediate. The inhabitants brought lawn chairs. The bridge was silent. They brought, Ssaveth repeated slowly, lawn chairs. For sitting. In the parking lot of a restricted weapons facility. While planning to storm it. Grix, who had been quiet through all of this, said softly, almost reverently, "Elder. I think these might be the most dangerous species in the sector." Ssaveth turned to him. "They have lawn chairs, Grix." "That," said Grix, "is exactly what I mean." The ship drifted in silence above the little blue planet. The planet spun. Somewhere below, in its billions, the soft, ridiculous, terrifying species went about its day, completely unaware that every major spacefaring civilization in the known galaxy had a standing policy to avoid it, not because its inhabitants were violent, but because they were wildly, exhaustingly, magnificently unpredictable. Ssaveth looked out the viewport at the pale blue dot. "Hail them," he said. Tova's hand hovered over the communication panel. "Are you sure?" He was not sure. He was the opposite of sure. He was what you would get if you put sure in a machine and ran it backwards. "Hail them," he said again. The signal went out. 12 seconds later, something came back. Not a military response. Not a formal government transmission. Not even a scientific team. It was a man named Petro, sitting in what the database identified as a kitchen, eating something called a sandwich, who looked directly into the camera he had pointed at the sky 3 hours ago on a hunch, and said, with a full mouth and absolutely no hesitation whatsoever. "Oh, thank God, I knew you guys were real. Do you want some food? I made too much." Ssaveth stared. Tova stared. Grix started laughing and could not stop. The most advanced survey vessel in the Vorrkai fleet hung in orbit above the Earth, and its commander had absolutely no idea what to do next. Nobody on the Vorrkai ship spoke for 11 full seconds after the transmission came through. 11 seconds is not long by most standards. But when you are the elder commander of the most decorated survey fleet in known space, and a biped in a small room is offering you food through a kitchen camera, 11 seconds feels like a very personal kind of eternity. It was Tova who finally moved. She pulled up the translation matrix, cross-referenced the signal, confirmed it was live, confirmed it was unencrypted, confirmed that yes, the being on the screen had crumbs on his shirt, and then she said, with the flat professionalism of someone being paid not to have feelings, "He is alone. No military signature. No government frequency. He appears to have hacked directly into our probe's emergency beacon using something the database calls a laptop computer and 17 hours of online tutorials." Grix made a sound that was half admiration, half despair. He taught himself to contact an alien ship from the internet. He also, Tova added, scrolling further, has a blog. He has been documenting the search for extraterrestrial life since 2011. He has 412 followers. One of them is his mother. Ssaveth looked at Petro. Petro was now holding up the sandwich toward the camera with an expression of genuine, open-hearted hospitality, as if offering food to a potentially multi-limbed being from another star system was simply what a decent person did in this situation. "Open a channel," Ssaveth said. "Elder, protocol states that first contact must be initiated through a government body, a recognized scientific institution, or a designated species representative with formal diplomatic credence." Tova. "Open the channel." She opened the channel. Petro's face changed the moment he heard the tone on his end. He sat up straight. He put the sandwich down. For one single moment, something passed over his face that was not excitement or humor or casual bravado. It was something older. Something that lived underneath all of that. It was awe. Raw, clean, quiet awe. The kind that only lives in a species that has spent its entire history looking up at the dark and wondering, with genuine and aching hope, whether anything up there was looking back. Then the moment passed, and Petro said, "Okay. Okay. Hello. Hi. Am I talking to an actual alien right now? Because if this is my cousin Dario pranking me again, I am going to lose my mind." Ssaveth cleared his throat. The translation matrix rendered his voice into something Petro's ears could process. It came out slightly deep, slightly formal, slightly surprised by its own existence. "You are not speaking with your cousin Dario. You are speaking with Elder Ssaveth of the Vorrkai observation fleet. We are, to use your phrasing, actual aliens." Petro stared. Then he turned off screen and yelled, at full volume, into what the database identified as an apartment hallway, "Mira. Mira, get in here. Mira." A woman appeared in the doorway behind him, holding a mug, wearing the expression of someone prepared for moderate inconvenience and receiving something else entirely. She looked at the screen. The screen showed a live feed from an alien vessel in orbit. She looked at Petro. Petro pointed at the screen with both hands, the way a person points when words have temporarily stopped working. Mira sat down on the floor. Just directly on the floor. Without looking for a chair. "That," said Grix, from somewhere behind Ssaveth, "is a completely reasonable response." What followed was not the 40-minute controlled debrief Ssaveth had planned. What followed was 4 hours and 37 minutes of conversation that the Vorrkai Cultural Archive would later classify, officially, as, and this is the real classification, the actual one that went into the permanent record, First Contact Event 7M09, Subtype, Unscheduled, Tone, Irregular, Outcome, Unresolved but surprisingly warm. Petro asked questions. He asked so many questions. He asked about faster-than-light travel and whether it felt like anything. He asked whether the Vorrkai had music and whether Ssaveth personally liked it. He asked whether there were other species out there, and when Ssaveth confirmed yes, dozens of documented civilizations, Petro turned to Mira and said, "I told you," with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had been right about something for 15 years and was finally allowed to feel it. Mira, who had by now moved from the floor to a chair and was recording everything on her phone, asked one question. Just one. She looked at the screen, at the alien elder with his ridged fingers and his observation robes and his four-eyed commander standing behind him, and she asked, "Are you afraid of us?" The bridge went very still. Ssaveth considered the question seriously, the way it deserved to be considered. He thought about the cultural database. The petting zoos and the nuclear warheads. The lawn chairs outside the military base. The songs they wrote about heartbreak and the monuments they built to their own dead. The fact that this man, this singular man with a blog and 400 followers and a sandwich, had looked at the sky and refused, for 15 years, to stop believing something was there. "Yes," Ssaveth said, finally, honestly. "Not because you are violent. Many species are violent. We are afraid of you because you are the only species we have ever encountered that is equally capable of enormous destruction and enormous kindness, sometimes within the same afternoon. We do not know which one you will choose. We are not sure you always know either." Petro was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly, like a man receiving a diagnosis he had already suspected. "Yeah," he said. "That's fair. That's really fair, actually." It was Mira who spoke next, and what she said was this: "Then stay. Not forever. Not officially. Just long enough to figure each other out a little. We have been alone up here for a very long time. You clearly have been watching for a while. We already know you exist. You already know we exist. The secret is gone." She paused. "And Petro did offer you food." Grix laughed again. He really could not help it. Ssaveth stood at the viewport for a long moment. Below him, the planet turned. City lights blinked across the dark side like signals, like a species perpetually trying to say, in every language it had ever invented, here. We are here. Please, someone, notice that we are here. He had noticed. The whole galaxy had noticed. They had just been too careful, too protocol-bound, too sensible to say so. Ssaveth turned to Tova. Extend orbit. Flag the contact as ongoing. And tell the council. He paused. Tell them first contact has been made and that the species representative is a man named Petro who has a sandwich and a blog and he would like us to stay for a while. Tova typed the message. She sent it. Somewhere across the communication network of the known galaxy, in council chambers and observation posts and survey vessels that had carefully kept their distance from the little blue planet for generations, the message arrived. The replies came back within the hour. Most of them were some version of the same thing. Of course it was an unscheduled civilian contact. Of course it was. What else were humans going to do? But underneath that, underneath the bureaucratic grumbling and the protocol citations and the formal demands for a full incident report, there was something else in those replies. Something that had no official name in the Vorrkai language, or in any of the 63 languages of the known spacefaring civilizations. In the human database, the closest word for it was relief. The stars had not forgotten their names after all. They had just been waiting for someone loud enough, stubborn enough, sandwich-equipped enough, to finally make them speak.